The blood on her dress had dried to the color of rust, but her hands still trembled as she pressed them against the barn door. Clara Hendricks hadn't meant to kill him. The thought circled her mind like a buzzard over carrion, relentless and patient. Behind her the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of approaching rain and the distant sound of hoofbeats that made her stomach clench with terror. She'd been running for 3 days now, stealing through fence lines and sleeping in ditches, always listening for the sound that would mean her end. The bounty hunters wouldn't care that Eddie Crenshaw had tried to force himself on her in that saloon back room. They wouldn't care that she'd only grabbed the letter opener to defend herself, or that his death had been an accident born of desperation and fear. All they'd see was the reward money and a woman with nowhere left to run. The rocking Med Ranch stretched before her like a promise she didn't deserve. Neat fence posts lined the property, and smoke curled from the chimney of a modest cabin that spoke of honest work and peaceful evenings. It was everything she'd dreamed of as a child, before life had taught her that some people were born for different kinds of stories. James McKinnon emerged from the cabin carrying a bucket of grain, his movements unhurried and deliberate. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of fair dealing and hard work. His hat sat at just the right angle, not too low to hide honest eyes, not too high to suggest vanity. When he saw her pressed against his barn, he didn't reach for the rifle propped by his door. He didn't shout or demand explanations. He simply set down the bucket and walked toward her with the careful approach of a man who understood spooked creatures. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "you look like you could use some help." Clara's voice cracked when she finally found it. "I ain't worth saving," she whispered, the words falling between them like stones in a still pond. James McKinnon studied her for a long moment, taking in the dried blood, the torn dress, the hollow desperation in her eyes. Then he tipped his hat again, and something in his expression shifted, not pity, but recognition of a choice already made. "Too late," he said simply. The hoofbeats were getting closer. James didn't ask questions. That was the first thing that surprised Clara as he led her into his cabin, one hand steady on her elbow as she stumbled over the threshold. The interior was sparse but clean, a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and shelves lined with books that spoke of winter evenings spent in thoughtful solitude. "Coffee's still warm," he said, already moving toward the stove. "When's the last time you ate?" Clara opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, even as exhaustion made her legs shake. "Why?" she managed. "You don't even know what I done." "Don't need to." James poured coffee into a tin cup, the liquid steaming in the morning air. "Woman running from something with blood on her dress. Either she's the victim or she's someone who fought back. Either way, she needs help." The simple certainty in his voice made something crack inside her chest. "What if I'm dangerous? What if helping me gets you killed?" James set the coffee on the table and looked at her directly. "Then I reckon that's my choice to make." Outside, the hoofbeats had stopped. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 4 men on horseback sat at the property line, their horses stamping and snorting in the cool morning air. She recognized the lead rider, Buck Morrison, a man who collected bounties like other men collected debts, with cold efficiency and no questions asked. "They're here," she whispered. James joined her at the window, his presence solid and reassuring. "Friends of yours, bounty hunters." The words tasted like ash. "There's a price on my head. $500. A low whistle escaped James's lips. Must have been some fight. Clara closed her eyes, remembering Eddie Crenshaw's hands on her, the letter opener catching lamplight, the terrible moment when his eyes went wide and empty. "I killed a man. Didn't mean to, but he's just as dead. He have it coming." The question was so matter-of-fact that Clara almost smiled. "Yeah, he did." James nodded once, as if that settled the matter entirely. "Then we best figure out how to keep you breathing." Morrison was dismounting now, his 3 companions fanning out to cover the approaches to the cabin. They moved with the practiced ease of men who'd done this before, who knew that cornered prey was often the most dangerous kind. "There's a root cellar," James said quietly, "behind the pantry. You can know." Clara's voice was stronger now, fed by something she'd almost forgotten she possessed. "I won't hide while you face them alone. That ain't right. This ain't your fight anymore. It became your fight the moment you chose to help." She met his eyes, seeing something there that made her believe for the first time in years that maybe some people really were worth the risk. "What's your plan?" The knock came hard and deliberate, the sound of knuckles that expected obedience. James had positioned Clara behind the kitchen table, where she'd have a clear shot at the back door if things went wrong. His rifle leaned against the wall within easy reach, though he seemed determined not to touch it unless absolutely necessary. "James McKinnon." Buck Morrison's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being feared. "Open up. We got business to discuss." James approached the door with measured steps, his hands visible and empty. When he opened it, he didn't step aside or invite them in, just filled the doorway with the quiet confidence of a man on his own land. "Buck Morrison." James's tone was cordial but not welcoming. "Been a while." "Not long enough." Morrison's face was sun-weathered leather stretched over sharp bones, his eyes the pale blue of winter sky. "We're tracking a fugitive woman by the name of Clara Hendricks. Word is she might have passed through this way." "That's so." James shifted slightly, his stance casual but blocking Morrison's view of the interior. "What did this woman do?" "Killed a man in Deadwood. Eddie Crenshaw." Morrison spat into the dirt, his expression suggesting the loss was no great tragedy. "Still, murder's murder. Law's the law." Clara pressed herself against the kitchen wall, her heart hammering so loud she was certain they'd hear it. Through the gap between door and frame, she could see Morrison's men positioned around the cabin like pieces on a chessboard, their rifles ready but not quite aimed. $500 reward, Morrison continued. "Alive or dead makes no difference to the judge. Course alive's worth more hassle. Dead's simpler for everyone. Sounds like you got your mind made up." James's voice remained level, but Clara caught the subtle shift in his posture, the way his weight settled over his feet like a man preparing for trouble. "Maybe I do. Question is, you seen her or not?" The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Clara watched James's reflection in the kitchen window, saw the moment he made his choice, not with words, but with the slight straightening of his shoulders that spoke of lines drawn in sand. "Can't say I have." Morrison's smile was thin as a knife blade. "Funny thing about lies, McKinnon. They got a smell to them, like fear and desperation." He took a step closer to the threshold. "Mind if we take a look around, just to satisfy our curiosity?" "I do mind, actually." James's tone remained pleasant, but steel had crept into it. "This is private property. You got a warrant?" "Don't need one if we got reasonable suspicion." Morrison's hand drifted toward his gun. "And right now I'm suspecting quite a bit." Behind him his men shifted in their saddles, reading the wind change. Clara could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge, could almost taste the violence building in the air like the pressure before a storm. "Reasonable suspicion," James repeated thoughtfully. "That's a fancy way of saying you got a hunch and a badge that don't mean much out here." Morrison's eyes went flat and dangerous. "Step aside, McKinnon." "No." The single word hung in the air like the last note of a funeral hymn. Clara watched through the window as Morrison's men tensed, their rifles shifting toward ready positions. In another heartbeat, blood would spill on James's front porch, and it would all be her fault. "Wait." Clara's voice cut through the tension as she stepped into view, her hands raised but her chin lifted with something that might have been dignity. "I'm here." James turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Clara." "No more running." She walked to his side, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to catch the scent of leather and honest sweat that seemed to define him. "I won't have your blood on my hands too." Morrison's smile was cold triumph. "Smart woman. Makes this easier for everyone, does it?" Clara kept her voice steady, though her knees felt like water. "Tell me, Morrison, You ever ask yourself why Eddie Crenshaw needed killing? Don't matter to me. Dead's dead, and law's law. He was raping women. The words came out flat and hard, carrying the weight of truth. Girls, mostly, young ones who couldn't fight back. I fought back. Something flickered in Morrison's eyes, not sympathy but calculation. Got witnesses to that. Would it matter if I did? Morrison shrugged. Might not. Either way, you killed him, and there's money on your head. That's all I care about. James stepped forward, his movement placing himself partially between Clara and the bounty hunters. What if someone else paid better? The offer hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. Morrison's attention sharpened, his pale eyes focusing on James with new interest. You don't have that kind of money, rancher. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. James's hand moved slowly toward his shirt pocket, producing a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. Question is, what's it worth to you to ride away and forget you ever saw this place? Morrison's men exchanged glances, their horses shifting restlessly beneath them. Clara could see the greed warring with duty in their faces, the eternal struggle between easy money and the law. That pouch don't look like it holds $500, Morrison said finally. It holds enough for you and your boys to drink well for a month. James tossed the pouch to Morrison, who caught it with practiced ease. Plus it comes with something extra. My word that if you ride back onto my land you won't leave it. Morrison weighed the pouch in his palm, then looked back at James with grudging respect. You know what you're buying yourself, McKinnon. Trouble with the law. I've had worse neighbors. For a long moment the two men stared at each other across the threshold, measuring will against will. Then Morrison pocketed the pouch and turned toward his horse. Boys, let's ride. Nothing here but a rancher and his hospitality. Clara felt her knees give way as the riders disappeared over the hill, James's strong arm catching her before she could fall. The coffee had gone cold, but Clara wrapped her hands around the tin cup anyway, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. James sat across from her at the rough wooden table, his presence as steady as the mountains that rose beyond his windows. The afternoon sun slanted through the glass, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. That was all your savings, wasn't it? She asked quietly. James shrugged, the gesture carrying no trace of regret. Money's just metal. It don't keep you warm at night or give your life meaning. Your ranch, how will you manage? Same way I always have. One day at a time with honest work and stubbornness. He met her eyes across the table. Besides, I got help now, if she's willing to stay. Clara felt something flutter in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the memory of what hope used to feel like. I don't know anything about ranching. I don't know anything about running from bounty hunters, so I figure She laughed then, a sound rusty from disuse but genuine. They'll be back, you know. Morrison's type, don't forget. Maybe, but next time we'll be ready. James reached across the table, his calloused fingers brushing hers with surprising gentleness. Question is, what do you want, Clara? Really want, not what you think you deserve. The words came easier than she'd expected. I want to stay. I want to help build something good here, something clean. I want to wake up without running, without looking over my shoulder. She paused, gathering courage. I want to prove I'm worth the risk you took. You already did that the moment you stepped out to face Morrison. Could have let me handle it alone, but you didn't. James's smile transformed his weathered features. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. They worked together that evening, James teaching her the evening chores while the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Clara found herself laughing at his patient corrections, her hands learning the rhythm of milking and feeding, her body remembering what it felt like to be useful rather than hunted. As twilight settled over the ranch, they sat on the front porch, watching the first stars emerge in the darkening sky. Clara leaned against the porch rail, feeling something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. I never thanked you, she said suddenly. For what? For believing I was worth saving when I couldn't believe it myself. James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the last light clung to the mountains. My PA used to say that sometimes a man's greatest gift ain't what he gives, but what he refuses to take away. Your worth was never mine to give, Clara. I just refused to let you throw it away. Years later, when Clara McKinnon would stand on that same porch watching her children chase fireflies through the summer dusk, she would remember that moment, the first time she truly understood that redemption wasn't something you earned, but something you accepted. And somewhere in the distance, as if carried on the evening wind, she could almost hear the echo of hoofbeats that had once meant death, but had delivered her instead to a life worth living. The ranch thrived, as did the love that had grown from desperate circumstances into something solid and enduring. And if occasionally travelers spoke of a woman who'd once been hunted but had found sanctuary in the arms of a man who understood that everyone deserved a second chance, well, that was just another story the wind carried across the endless prairie, where broken things could still be made whole.